like it's a societal norm that feeling anger is not good, then this will automatically turn into a part in your psyche that is telling you that is constantly shaming the anger. Or if you grew up in a family where nobody was allowed to experience joy, it's like, fuck, like joy is so childish and don't do that. This voice from the outside turns into a voice from the inside.
And there's also such a big difference between us thinking that we have to find the word. Yesterday, a conversation, and they're like, yeah, but like sometimes I just take a bit of time to find the word that I'm feeling. I was like, okay, then how about try a facial expression or try a sound? There's sounds coming out of my mouth right now that we collectively have agreed have a meaning. But there's no difference than if I would just be going like, like it doesn't actually make any difference. I'm just expressing vibration through my vocal cords, and it is releasing energy, which is emotion.
Welcome to the Spiritual Bypassers podcast with Jannick, Ashley, and Tim. This week, we talked about truth and how you can feel what's true to you through experiencing your body. We talked about how to trust your body again and do what excites you. Then we talked about toxic shame, and we're going to tell you a step-by-step process of overcoming shame and building a new direction that helps you connect with life in a beautiful way. And Ashley reveals why it's so important to work with anger if you want to overcome your toxic shame and move into a more empowered and wholesome life.
Enjoy.
Beautiful. Enjoy.
Good morning, people. You're back listening to the Spiritual Bypassers podcast with Jannick Apitz, Ashley Velvet Frost, and Tim Thiele. We're delighted to welcome you. And this week, fuck, I'm doing an intro. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this today. I didn't sleep well.
I didn't sleep well.
You had a party.
I'm
You both
really
didn't
sorry.
sleep well. You guys, I'm fasting. This is day 2. This is super challenging. I've never eaten that little ever in my life. No, that's not true. I've never eaten anything. I've never not eaten anything for such a long time. So
2 days.
my brain is like going places. And on top of that, I'm doing a breathwork practice that is pretty intense every morning for 11 days. And this is day 8. So yeah, I'm in some kind of
What has changed with the fasting and the breath work? Any results?
results.
The results. What are the numbers?
Do you mean in my everyday life on day 2 of
what
fasting?
did something change? You spoke of a tunnel or whatever feeling you had.
Yeah, the breath work is pretty intense. You are basically every day you are reflecting on a certain time in your life. So the first day you're reflecting on the first 3 years, second day the next 3 years, and so on. So and then you use the directions of the like north, east, west, south. You use those directions to call in certain kind of energies, like motives, right? For example, in the east, it's about owning your power, or in the south, it's about relationships and stuff like that. And so these two combined together, like the years, and then each like part of your life you're reflecting on from different angles. It brought up some memories that I didn't know I had, and made me understand, you kind of like connecting the dots. You're kind of like, oh, every day it's the same topic. When I look into the direction of the south, where it's about relationships, it's just it shows up in a different way. It's the same theme, but every 3 years or every 5 or 6 or 7 years, it shows up in this like the same pattern. So it's a really powerful reflection. And then if you ask me what changes in the present moment, the way I conduct my relationships, it can make me feel differently, because I see, like, I become conscious of the pattern playing out again. So I kind of like empower myself to choose. And when it's unconscious, like always with the shadows, I act it out. But if I make it conscious through like detecting the pattern and recognizing it, I get power back to choose, oh yeah, this is me again, like showing up in the same way. Is this me? Is this how I want to be? Or just a pattern that I keep repeating? So yeah, in my current relationship, like the most present one with my girlfriend, it shows up in the way certain things make me feel. Like, for example, something that hurts me, then I like either I act it out or I project it outwards and I say it's their fault or whatever, or I take it inwards and I'm like I'm owning it and I'm like, oh, this is something that keeps repeating in my life, so it's something to look at inside of myself instead of in her or in the people around me. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds like you're getting a software update.
Yeah, it feels a bit
That's
like
why,
that. It's a
that's
pattern
why,
interrupt, like always when
yeah,
growth happens, it's a pattern interrupt.
yeah, yeah. That's the description that I found in the past days, like of really adopting new behaviors, and you can feel, or you've released something every time I have like a phase of transformation. It feels like I've just gotten a new firmware. It's really strange. Like the way I see the world, my projections, and my experience is totally different. And it feels like, okay, I'm more easeful, and I'm not the same as I was before. Just like my iPhone is not the same when it gets a new update. It's a bit mechanicalistic, if that's a word.
Technical?
Technical, but it holds a point. So
Yeah,
actually,
and I
yeah,
wanna before we go to over to Ashley, I'm channeling today, right? Because
because you
I'm
you
open,
just
I'm empty.
yeah,
There's nothing in here.
I can tell. Amazing.
It's it's interesting to think about the fact that yeah, it's a pattern interrupt, but what really happens when you grow? It's a change of perspective. Always, it's always a change of perspective. And then you can ask yourself, well, if everything is just about perspectives, why don't I just take on the best possible perspective on life? And then you can
Yeah.
think, what is the best possible perspective on life? And then you could come up with these spiritual statements like, everything is happening for me. Everything is perfect the way it is. Everything is love, and it's just like love exploring itself, this whole process that's happening right now. These would be probably the things you would, if you could choose, you would choose these perspectives because they are amazing. They make you basically the creator of your life. And you can also take on the perspective that everything you do will come into being or is already like coming into being. So basically taking on the perspective that everything you have is exactly what you want right now. Even not wanting it or thinking that you don't want it, even that is part of what you want right now, what you want to experience right now. And it's funny because that is the divine, the ultimate perspective. And you, if you could choose, you would just take that on. So the question is, why don't you? And the answer that I came up with is because we are addicted to a different perspective, like emotionally, basically addicted to a different perspective. We have to free ourselves from this addiction first in order to take on that other perspective. And yeah, that it's a different way of coming to the same result, that the work we do, like the emotional release, the really becoming conscious of the unconscious, because it is the most important thing to become free, to choose whatever perspective you want. Basically, what we are doing is just making the unconscious conscious so that we become free again to choose to look at life the way we want to and not the way we have to because of repeating patterns and emotional addictions.
I love that. And what comes to mind is the really good and really important and possibly life-changing question. Like if you have an answer to that question, you're pretty well off. And the question is, how do you know if something is true to you? How do you know if something is in alignment with you? How do you know something is speaking from your soul rather than from learned and from learned experiences that are maybe based in shame or based in patterns that maybe your parents and not even yours. And to me, the answer, in my experience, the answer to that question is quite hopeful and quite optimistic. And that is usually the perspective that brings in more lightness is more connected to my truth. Like the more I feel tense and the more I feel, even when I'm really righteously protecting, like that person is fucking wrong and I'm right, I'm still contracted, like I'm still suffering. And the truth is it's like a spectrum. In these moments, I'm pretty far away from my truth because I'm projecting it outwards. And in the moments where I feel easeful and in peace with myself and others, these are the moments where I'm close to my truth, where there's no tension and no protectors. We had the metaphor of milk glass in this podcast once that I find quite fitting here as well. It's like stripping away the milk glass of trauma that makes it hard to see reality, to come up clarity. And where there's clarity, there is usually also ease because there's nothing. That's the core. Like it's like putting on the right glasses.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's I like that you said it's the core. It's the clarity is the core. And when we feel like we have issues, we are confronted with a problem, it's not from clarity, it's from doubt. I mean, doubt connected to the word "tu" in German as well, Zweifel. It means you're split up. You're not connected to the core. You're not looking from the core, from clarity. You're looking from two different perspectives, and they don't like each other. So probably a a perspective that is influenced by trauma, by the past, and then a part of you that doesn't like that because it kind of knows, but it doesn't know how to solve it. So they fight against each other, and then you are in doubt. You need to go beyond the doubt to back to the clarity. And there, I really find it helpful what you said, to use the body as an instrument. We've forgotten that, or many people have forgotten to use their body as an instrument to be like, what feels exciting, what excites me, when do I feel in ease, and then to trust that. But I also believe that in order to be able to trust that, you need to have this like awareness. Yeah, you need to establish this level of awareness, because otherwise, like you said, how can you trust that feeling if maybe it's just an avoidance pattern? It's like, yeah, it feels good to push away that person. It feels really good to
eat
push
Burger
away
King
that
every
person.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels really light in my body to push away that person. Or the other way around, a lot of people have problems with pushing away others. So they'll be like, no, I'll stay. It's okay. It feels nice, because it feels really bad in my body to push that person away. That feels really bad. And then again, we are not free to listen to our intuition, and it's the milk glass again that controls us. So that's why, in order to really trust the experience of what feels good and what feels bad, it's important to become conscious of what is not allowed in our system to be felt. And a lot of times it's anger, like Ashley knows, especially in the healing bubble. And out there in the corporate world, a lot of times it's vulnerability and sadness that is not allowed. So we will make decisions based on the things that are not allowed to be felt. And it's nice to free ourselves from that, and then to be able again to trust the experience of excitement and ease. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be interested in your perspective, Ashley, because I think there's when we talk about emotional release, there's this trap or this misconception, misunderstanding that can very quickly happen, especially in regards to anger. Because if we talk about that peace is close to the truth, then we could, ask ourselves, can I not be angry and also connected to my truth? And I feel like anger is almost this energy that is stepping in to defend truth, and the job or the challenge then is not to get, caught up in the anger, but more like let the anger speak through it and then to arrive at peace. So what I think that this is maybe fictional, but I can see that as a danger, that people are like, yeah, I've read a post of Ashley and she says being angry is good, and so I'm shouting at my boss and I'm shouting at this and fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, and this is my truth, this is my, and it's like,
Yeah, we need to make some
not really
posts
how it
to
works.
counteract that, I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a phrase yesterday that I read that I told Tim that said anger is an enzyme. So it's like eating away or burning away at the illusions that are maybe hiding what the truth is. So maybe they don't have to be on separate ends of these two poles. Anger is for me such an interesting emotion at the moment because it feels indeed very different to some of the other core emotions because there's a lot of nuances to it and it feels almost like a transitory emotion. Like it's one that you're using like you're riding a rapids and then it's bringing you to somewhere. And so I've had a lot of people say like, oh, I've heard like anger actually isn't a real emotion because it's not something that you stay in for a long, like, you know what I mean? The misunderstanding people would have with that. And I'm like, no, like it is a core emotion. Like we all feel it as humans. But there is this misunderstanding a lot around like the fire. Like you can use the metaphors very well of what the fires can do for you, whether it's like burning away the illusions. And yeah, I had some very interesting conversations about anger yesterday evening. And there's something came up. I had also a discovery call literally like an hour ago with someone who was like, yeah, I'm trying so much to stay in the love and in my heart, but I noticed that there's a lot going on in my stomach and in my like lower belly. And this person's quite aware. So they were like, yeah, I really feel that there's a something protecting it there. And this is like somebody who's been like in normal life in Holland and is now coming into the healing world and has been around a lot of the love and light people who are like, yeah, focusing. It's like that journey down from your head to your heart. And again, it's this top down view of like how to get to your feelings and people really, really forgetting that it starts at the root, it starts at the base where the Kundalini energy is rising up from, and that it's actually the other way around. So it was just yeah, very cool to meet a very beginner person who's very aware that like, oh, I think it's not meant to be this way, but all meditation, all these therapists are like getting you in this way, and especially for men who are like, I would say normal life men, but I think this person was like a postman, like he's not in any of this field, and um it's really hard to go in with the words and with the talking, especially as a guy, because you're not given like necessarily the vocabulary or the permission to go into the emotional feeling space as kids. Like people very rarely ask little boys, how are you feeling? They'll ask, what are you doing? And that's really a
Mm.
shift then as you grow up of like the capacity and the how many words you have for the feeling of sad. Like most men, it's like sad, and girls would be like distraught, emotion, melancholic. Like you just like learn more emotive words with it. Um, yeah, that's just some of my insights that were coming up the last days.
That's so important. What especially resonated for me was the part about words. Like it's so interesting. Once you have a word for an internal state, it makes it so much easier to process it and build a relationship with it. For example, I found out recently that, I sometimes feel like I'm in a fog of, fear, but it's like very vague and undefined. And I just read like a sentence in a book that's basically it's anxiety. And now I'm like, oh, this is not something vague. This is me feeling anxiety. And now I can relate to the anxiety. It's almost like giving a baby a name. And it's like I can talk to the baby, I can address the baby, and I can build a relationship with it. And with anger, it has so many facets that sometimes people don't even know that they're experiencing anger. And maybe one of the many facets of anger, like frustration or rage or even jealousy, that's super important.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times anger doesn't show as anger, or the repressed emotions don't show up as that emotion. They show up as something in the, like a pain in the body, or suppressed anger might show up as resentment, or um, being annoyed, or whatever. It's like, it's very subtle. And like you said, every time we find words for how we feel, it's kind of realigning. Before it's like the mind is somewhere here trying to figure it out, something is not right, and the emotion that wants to be felt is over here. And once they align, and it's like, oh, I'm angry. Yes, I'm angry. Then it can flow again. It's like, yes, mind and body are aligned. Now I understand what's going on. There's not this discrepancy between the two.
And there's also such a big difference between us thinking that we have to find the word, that like this is honestly, like yesterday, a conversation, and they're like, yeah, but like sometimes I just take a bit of time to find the word that I'm feeling. I was like, okay, then how about try a facial expression or try a sound? Because in reality, what are words? Like, it's just, there's sounds coming out of my mouth right now that we collectively have agreed have a meaning. But there's no difference than if I would just be going like, like it doesn't actually make any difference. I'm just expressing vibration through my vocal cords, and it is releasing energy, which is emotion. That's what I had a client yesterday, and was really just showing to her, like, it doesn't matter, like you don't need to sound these perfect words of like, mother, I am so angry at you for these. It can just be like the sound of frustration, like with a kid or with somebody who's like non-verbal. Like, there's a lot of actual things we see in people who are autistic, who can't talk, or who have stimming, which is like movements that bring them comfort. Like, actually, the more healing work I do, the more stimming that I actually do, because like even yesterday, walking on the treadmill, and then I'm thinking of some things and some emotions come, and I just shake it a bit. Like, the impulse is there. Anybody looking at me might be like, oh, maybe that person's a bit, in society's terms, like on the spectrum. But it's like, no, actually, maybe your body is just finally finding ways to move excess energy without it needing to have a full healing story and a full process that like, this is exactly, it's like, no, just do it. Just like use the body. David Bedrick uses the phrase radical soma. Like, what if we're like radically, without shame, using our voice, our face, our breath, our movement? And that's like foundational stuff to this work. It's yeah, fun.
Yeah,
I like
I've
that.
started to do this actually every day. I take 10 minutes, and I'm just weird for 10 minutes straight. And that's so interesting, because when I say I'm weird, like I make, weird expressions, I stretch my body, I make like really strange noises. And in the way I talk about it, I can already tell I'm doing this in my room, because if I were to do it outside, people would look at me strange. And that's the very reason why it's suppressed. And that's one more reason why I think it's healthy to do it, to just break free for, even if it's just 10 minutes a day, and do the things you're not allowed to do in society that you need to do, because it's just your body doing its thing, trying to communicate.
Having lived with Tim and traveled with him, I can confirm he makes lots of noises.
I took that to the next. It was like the noises someone does when after waking up, like, and then at some point I was like, wait a minute, if this is what, just indulge in that for 10 minutes straight, and just, and it's so good, because it's like yoga, but in my own pace and in my own weirdness. It's really, I can recommend that to everyone.
I love that. Yeah, I've had some weird sessions as well in the mornings. And it's not only about being weird in your expression and like shouting out
Don't be
nonsense.
weird for the sake of being weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's even about giving yourself permission to say whatever you want. Like all the things you could never say because you're way too ashamed. And you allow yourself to say them, speak them out loud, because right now it's safe. It's completely safe. It has zero consequences. You can say whatever you want. And sometimes I was surprised and even like shocked by the things that came out of me. And it doesn't even matter if it's true or not, like something really radical, like I want to kill my parents. Okay, so maybe some part of me at some point in life felt like that. It's like I want them away, like forever. Like sounds like something in me might be like really angry. It's coming from a really angry place. And it has nothing to do with what I'm going to do in real life. Quite the opposite. I feel like the violence in the world is a consequence of people not expressing these things for too long, and then them coming out in ways that are really, really unhealthy. And giving ourselves permission to do that and to say whatever and think whatever, it's really freeing, because all the energy that keeps this down because of the shame, no, I'm not allowed, a lot, so much energy, so much suffering. And then in these moments, we can free ourselves from that and learn a lot about ourselves, because some of the things we don't even know that we repress them. It just happens automatically, and we don't know until they come out of us. And we're like, whoa, okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
This is one of the most foundational exercises that we do at the retreats, like not the trainings but the alchemy retreats. And it's the words unsaid exercise. And it's something that seems so simple, like it's targeted a little bit more towards maybe like unprocessed hurt or grief or anger that still is residing in regards to like a particular person in that moment. But it's really like, it felt that I've done it on the 2 last retreats. It felt like a ceremony, like one by one, each person going up, supported and watched by the rest of the group, and to just leave it all on the table, but there's no table. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
really surprising the things that come up.
Yeah.
Who would you guys have that conversation with if you had to do it right now? Not that you're going to, but like, if you had to.
I'm thinking about a friend. I just went into my fantasy while you spoke, and I spoke to a guy who severely hurt me, and I think traumatized my sense of friendship when I was a teenager, that I'm still recovering from. I think I would teach him a lesson.
Maybe we need to do this, Tim.
Yeah. So, the way I would do it is I would actually do it in the mirror. Like, I have a really big mirror in my room, and I would have a conversation that I need to have with myself. So I'm saying these things out loud, and simultaneously I'm listening to myself empathically. And I think that it's really stirred something up now, and I think it would be good to do that.
Jannick, how about you?
The first things that came up were partner, ex-partner, mother. And then my mind would go to mother, because I always feel like it's the root for a lot of hurt that happened afterwards. And she's present in the processes that are going through me at the moment as well. And then a protector part probably came up, and wanted to ask the question, okay, but how do you know when it's enough? Like, when you're just indulging in it, because I've like done these kind of things, and then it wants to protect me from going there again and again and again and again, and wants to ask, I don't know when is enough, when are you looping, or when are you just indulging in it?
I would say if you're doing it more than like 10 minutes, then probably looping. And when you feel that calmness in your heart, then that's probably where, for that day at least, it's enough. And not to say that the topic doesn't come up again. Like, we're always spiraling upwards. You're always going to touch again on these core topics, but it's like the finer nuances that you're touching on too. So,
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that symbol of a spiral. It's so important to keep that in mind, because otherwise you will create shame. That I've been there 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, and it's still there.
wow.
And the shame around that will keep you in there. But if you take the symbol that you just mentioned of the spiral, you're like, of course I will touch it from different angles. I will touch it again and again and again. It doesn't mean that I'm not making progress.
Yeah, and all you have to consider is, okay, that was the past, but we're in the now. and it's present now. So let's sit with it.
Yeah, exactly. Trust your experience and meet, like my tattoo says, meet yourself where you're at. Shamelessly meet yourself where you're at. It's so powerful.
This is a very curveball ADHD question, but do you feel that if for some reason we didn't have memories, then we would be like completely free and happy and just like present in the moment if you like didn't have long-term memories?
Do you mean, are you referring
We
to
wouldn't
both
be
the
able to
mind and the
function.
body?
Well, no, yeah, I mean, because you've seen there's some movies where there's like 50 First Dates where every day she wakes up and she forgets like who she is and she has to watch a video every morning that reminds her she had an accident and who she is. But like if you really didn't have memories of these things that hurt us in the past, at least mentally, it's a good point you say about the body, like how that would impact things.
I think if it's just mentally, then it would create a lot of confusion and suffering because that's what's happening. Some information are stored in the body, but we can't access the memories. We've kind of separated ourselves from them. And then we're wondering why we are suffering, why we're repeating the same emotional patterns over and over again. And it's this, repetitive compulsion. What's the word? Wiederholungszwang. Repetition compulsion. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you're like, you repeat it, but unconsciously. So I feel like that's kind of what would happen. But if you remove the memory in the body as well, I think that would mean removing, kind of like allowing the perspective of back then when it happened, I was fully able to feel through it. So nothing needed to be stored. So if you can remove that, I think that would mean removing a lot of tension in the body because
Okay,
the
guy.
way the body remembers these kind of things, is through tension, contraction,
So
stiffness.
spoiler alert, we have lost our memories.
Exactly. Nice. It's
Wow.
exactly what happened. The body remembers, but the mind doesn't. So we need to realign. We need to access the body and create awareness and consciousness and safety and love around it. And then by doing that, memory comes up again and it realigns. And the remembering of the body can pass through you.
It reminds me of the idea of individuation from Carl Jung, which is basically saying that healing or the goal of healing or the goal of the human development is to become whole. And
Yeah.
if I didn't have traumatic memories or if my body wasn't armored, I would feel like I'm completely myself. Like I'm completely free from limiting past experiences, from traumatic charges in my body, from whatever is imprinting me today. But I find the question it's really hard to answer because I mean practically you would kind of be unable to function because we need memories. But I like if the question is if what would happen if I would be free from traumatic memories, then I would probably be a ball of bliss. And but then again, I think there's also part of me that thinks, wouldn't that be kind of boring? Isn't that like the idea of um, utopia of just being everything is all right? And isn't it also kind of what makes life fun to have challenges and to evolve and to be on the search for something? I don't know, but
Yeah,
it's a good question.
totally. It is. That's why, I mean, it kind of like loops back to the beginning of our conversation when you actually realize what you have is exactly what you want. Is a different way of arriving there. It's like once you really think it through and really go there and be like, yeah, all the things that I consciously want, you have it. Then you're like, wait, all the things I consciously want, all the things my ego wants, like this state of ever present bliss or whatever. Oh, I just realized I don't actually want that. I want challenge, I want growth, I want to want something. And I can't want something when I have it. I want the feeling of wanting something, all these kind of things. And then you realize, oh yes, I'm there. Maybe I'm exactly where I want to be. It's
Yeah.
it's the same message that the book Existential Kink, that I love so much and refer to a lot, conveys. It's you know, having is evidence of wanting. You have exactly what you want, and including the fact that you don't want it. That's what you also want. You want to not want what you currently have. And then your mind becomes very still for a moment, and then immediately comes up with the next thing or feeling, in order not to feel good about it, you know, in order not to admit it, that everything is kind of like perfect, you know. No, 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 that's way too dangerous.
Yeah, that's a good point. That just got me thinking, because I was, you know, I was watching myself and it's like, why do I believe that life is or should be challenging, and why do I think that is fun? Like, if I believe that and if I follow what you just said, wouldn't that mean that my subconscious is like, oh, you like challenges? Here's tons of challenges, have fun with it. And if I believe like, and then I'm asking myself, then I'm going through life and be like, why is this topic still? Why is this? Why is this? And if you say everything that I have in my life and my whole experience as a result of my desires, or is already what I subconsciously want, then I'm like, maybe maybe it would be good for me to tilt back from the spectrum of life is, you know, suffering and challenge and evolving and things like this, to more a state of, you know, life also just is. And
Yeah.
maybe bliss is allowed as well, and maybe, you know, it's interesting that I just uncovered that shadow through listening to myself. It's good.
I love that. And one more thing, and what's the way, we could ask ourselves, what's the way to get there? And I think it's owning fully that you want what you have.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
fucking love it. Like
Yeah.
I love being challenged. I love and also indulging in my suffering and being cared for by the people who love me. I love that I feel loved in my challenges. Like when I'm really suffering and I'm feeling small, then people gather around me. I can ask everyone for help. I get responses and I'm being mirrored, and all of these things. And it really, you know, as I say this, I can feel in my in my heart area that it does something. It's like challenge is maybe feels like a gateway into feeling loved and feeling connection.
Yeah. Yeah. This is very close to the work that Parts work does, of finding the utility
Yeah,
in our seemingly unwanted pattern,
yeah,
and the innocence in it as well. I love that. Like, I recently used that word a lot. It's so innocent. All our strategies of beating ourselves down, of repressing our anger and making ourselves sick, like, it can seem like, oh, this is so stupid, stop doing that. And we use these kind of, we might even use this in marketing, you know, for our work. It's like, stop doing that. It's like, it's destroying your body, and it is. And at the same time, it's so innocent. It's like the best this inner child knows on how to deal with a situation, and it has a great utility. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. Everything happens for us. All the parts work for us.
yeah.
I was imagine like innocent, but then also sometimes just like a dumb caveman. It's like a dumb caveman trying to navigate a spaceship. He's like, oh,
Yeah. I'm just doing my best, bro.
uh, love
So
it.
speaking of innocence,
God.
um, we had quite a good conversation. We haven't even dipped into the topic of today, and we already unfolded a really nice conversation. But still, I feel
To
like
prepare something.
it
Yeah.
could be good to dive into what I prepared, and it also sort of latches onto what we already talked about. I wanted to talk. I want to talk about shame and the different phases of shame. So I'm just currently reading a book by John Bradshaw, and he is dividing shame into toxic shame and healthy shame. And that was a quite important insight for me, that shame can actually be healthy. Shame can be the voice of conscience in our head that tells us that we're not, there's in toxic shame, we either feel we're more than human or we're less than human. If we feel less than human, then that means like, oh, I'm so bad, I don't deserve to live, oh no, leave me alone. And more than human is like, I'm the best, like, look at me. It's this narcissistic stance that is actually a defense against a deep, deep hurt. And what healthy shame does is that it keeps us from being inflated, and it brings our 2 feet back on the ground. Like, I'm not, to me, that was actually a very important insight, that I'm actually quite normal. I always felt so alien and so displaced. And there's like a sense of inflation also in that. Like, I'm not like every one of you. I'm not, always almost saying like, I'm superhuman. I'm not like everyone else. And to me, it was so healing to realize I'm actually just Tim. And the emotion that caused that was feeling that healthy sense of shame. So I want to read a quote that I find quite enlightening, and then hear your thoughts on that. Toxic shame is the feeling of being worthless, inadequate, and fundamentally flawed. It is not just the feeling that you have made a mistake, but that you are a mistake. It's the core belief that something is inherently wrong with you, and that no matter what you do, you'll never be good enough. To be shamebound means that whenever you feel any feeling, need, or drive, you immediately feel ashamed. The dynamic core of your human life is grounded in your feeling, needs, and drives. When these are bound by shame, you are shamed to the core. And I really resonated with that, because this fog that I described earlier, this feeling of anxiety, is almost like a pillow that shame puts around me, and it's like, you better not act out anything that is going on inside yourself. It's better to hide, because who would listen to what you have to say? Like, you're worthless anyways. Like, that's a very extreme thing, but that's what I'm uncovering currently, which is a dynamic in myself. And I find it super important to talk about it, because the way I came about this was, I asked, I researched what are the most common struggles that human beings suffer from. And one of the biggest struggles for human beings is the feeling of, I'm not good enough and I'm inherently flawed. Like, across the board, it's a worldwide phenomenon. That's what people experience. And that's why I find it very worthwhile to talk about this sense of being flawed and feeling like a mistake, and not like we made a mistake.
Yeah. Shame is also something we're like really not born with. So all of these beliefs around what is good, what is not, is also interesting when you look at like the variation between countries and cultures. Like, we're shamed for different things than maybe people in Japan are shamed for, or people in India are shamed for. So it's like, for me, also very interesting to see like where people come from when we're talking about this, and like the cultural specific aspects. It's funny you say this, because I literally this morning woke up from a dream that my subconscious is like still shaming myself about repetitively, by repeating this dream like every few weeks, or like the same topic of like not being at wherever this like success line is that I think a 31, 32-year-old should have, of like having a home, being married, having already 2 kids, like this like very, very deep indoctrination of like what is normal, is like, rationally I understand, like, I'm on my path and I chose to do this healing journey. I chose to not follow the picket fence path that I had available to me in my early 20s, but still my psyche is like bringing it up and like shaming me about it. So it's like, indeed, like also there's parts inside I'm like, okay, but like, is this my truth? Is this something that is actually like, do I believe in this metric of what you should or shouldn't do? So there's like a big clash going on. So it's just interesting that you're bringing this up as well. And like shame, I find is very, indeed, like very necessary at times. Like it's good to be shamed. Like if you're going to kill someone, then you're probably going to get shamed by other people to be a murderer. Like if you're going to break some of the laws, you're going to get shamed by the collective. That's very extreme examples, but there are ways in which shame does keep us in line in a way to be good citizens or to be good people. But that is such a fine balance that then it pushes people too far into the goodness and into the people pleasing prospect as well, like the shame of hurting other people, of being rejected. I did a boundaries class this week on my membership, and the core limiting belief that almost every single person shared is that if I express X boundary, then I would be alone. And that seems to be really like the fundamental core wound of all of, not all, but like a lot of us is like, if I'm authentic, I get rejected. I end up alone, and that equals death if we're looking at caveman terms. Because we do have the caveman running a little deck inside our head. So he's like, death bad, no, abort. In the red.
Yeah, I really like what you just said. And I feel like it's important to also talk about where does shame show up in the body. And it's usually the stomach area that we relate to shame and to anger as well, right? Like in the chakra system, the solar plexus. And it's really holding back our power and our sense of self-worth. And it's actually really related if you think about it, this area of the gut, of the anger, of the shame. And why anger? Because when you are powerless, when you have this sense of like, I can't control my surroundings, then you are repressing your anger, because anger is kind of like the driving force, driving change. And then with this sense of powerlessness, you feel almost like it is the shame. It's like, no, you are not powerful. You can't change things. No, the way you are and what you want in life is shameful. Don't. And then it represses this. And so a question that's related to shame as well is, what situation in your life made you feel powerless, so that you have like this sense of, okay, yeah, I was just powerless. I couldn't go for what I want. So probably now I need to shame it. That's the safest coping mechanism, is to shame that desire, because that way I'm not going there again. And then I don't have to have the feeling of powerlessness. Yeah.
Linked to anger, there's an interesting topic. Lots of coincidental conversations, guys, this week. Because there's a lot of things happening in the world, a lot of injustice, a lot of people dying, a lot of things going on that we feel powerless about. Like, what can I do about other governments or other, like, feeling so small in terms of the impact we can make? And that in turn also creating shame around like, I'm not doing enough, or like, I don't know how to help, and then going into freeze, not speaking up, like still shaming also ourselves about not doing enough with that. So it's super interesting dynamic coming up. So not even that, like I've noticed in the past year a lot of like shame coming from the outside, like you're not talking enough about Palestine, or you're not talking enough about this topic, and you're not doing enough. And I mean, hey, me and Tim have made content on my Instagram that's doing similar phrasing sometimes, just to kind of poke people a bit, like telling people that they need to start watching the news a bit, or start looking at what's going on in the world. I think we coined the term rage bait, Tim. The content.
Rage bait?
Yeah. Someone commented that. I was like, that's amazing. They're like,
rage bait is an established one, but we have a lot of rage baits going on, yeah.
Yeah, but that dynamic with the shame very present. And then I guess a question I have, because this also gets commented a lot as a question on my posts, Tim, how do you release shame? Like, I know my answers and opinions about releasing and inhibiting emotions, but I want to hear what you would say to someone.
That's super individual, like especially with shame, because I personally feel shame is more a relational dynamic. I can feel shame in my body as well, but shame to me is more the way that I relate, toxic shame, the way that I relate, period. And it's the essence of who I think I am, and thus is playing out in the way I'm relating. Like I'm relating to myself. If I'm in a toxic shame cycle and this is really active and I'm triggered in some way, I relate to myself as if I'm worthless. And and I act as if I'm worthless. Like I will stop caring for myself. I will go hide whatever patterns are coming up. And the first step is, as always, is awareness of that. Is awareness of actually I'm noticing my self-talk is this and that way. And then I can notice, okay, I feel quite ashamed right now. Oh, my posture is super hunched over. Oh fuck, my my stomach is super tight currently. And I'm like, I just feel like a Gollum creature that, wants to hide. And then like in like playing that out, I have contacted a part already, for example, my inner Gollum, and I can talk to him and I can talk to what he's believing and what his story is. And I can ask him, where in my body are you? And maybe he would be in the middle of my body, and I can just establish a relationship with it. And the important thing is to relate to it not through the lens of toxic shame, but through the lens of acceptance and finally, maybe even love of that part that in me that is so thinks it's so unworthy of love and so unworthy of living a good life and living in integrity and just wants to crawl and it's like, no, don't look at me. I don't deserve you. To open up to that part and be like, hey, you are welcome here and I'm here to listen to you. Like you are safe. You're safe to come out. And this needs a connection to, this needs awareness, because the awareness is detaching yourself from that shame and connecting you to the part of you that can actually take care. So that's roughly how I would go about it. Like always connecting to the feeling in the body, to the, to the posture, to how do I relate to the room, to myself, what are my thoughts, explore, and then see if a part's coming up and get in a conversation with that part and really talk to it and talk to it until it's happy, until it has what it wants, until it feels understood. That would
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, I like that. And on top of that, coming back again to the utility and like becoming aware when you're like, okay, you can even say to yourself, I don't need to feel ashamed, and then see how the body reacts. And there will be a, yes, I have to. I have to. Like I want to let my shame go. No, I don't want to let my shame go. You create this response in your body. You create the no, or the kind of like disagreeing energy to that sentence that you always tell yourself you want. And by that, you bring up this other energy. And then this is the part that you can, connect with and ask, okay, you don't want to let it go. Why? What would happen if you allow yourself to feel no shame? No, that's so scary. I would like probably do the thing that I've wanted to do since 10 years. And then maybe I'll be successful with it or I'll fail. And you discover what the shame is protecting you from. So maybe sometimes it's sitting with the shame and being with it, and also probably like seeing the utility in it, but then going one level deeper and be like, what is the shame protecting you from? What emotions are too scary to be felt? Is it the feeling of success? Is it the feeling of being seen? And then you realize, once this emotion will not kill me, like Ashley said, because that's what's programmed in the system. Once you realize that, then you can also let go of the shame around it.
Mm-hmm. And there's also, shame is technically a cover emotion, like what you say, that there's something underneath this. It's not actually like a core, like the book, It's Not Always Depression. even though it's the title is talking about depression, it's actually like really foundational of like what the core emotions and what like inhibiting emotions are, how they're presenting. It's like the beginner's guide to emotional release. Like I was reading this and I was like, did our teacher like read this and like put it into the curriculum? Because it's like really, and with guilt, anxiety, and shame, it calls them inhibiting or covering emotions. So they're actually on the path down to revealing something underneath. And that could even be excessive joy, could even be like excessive excitement. It's not always like, oh, there's anger under here or there's sadness under here. It's also like
Yeah.
we have a lot of shame about like the beauty and authenticity of being a human. Sometimes
Yes.
even the shameful part.
Yes. And especially in our society, you know, a lot of actually fear that is then connected to that emotion, like you said, joy. Why? Why? Because it creates disconnection again. And disconnection, some part of our subconscious still believes disconnection means death, because it did when we were a child. So shame, you know, there's the layer of shame, and then you see, oh, I'm afraid of the joy underneath. Why? Because joy will create disconnection. Like nobody will like me with my joy. So it's good to have that shame, because then people will like me, and that's really good. That's really important. That creates other, and you know, fulfills other needs that you have.
Can I read you I've got the notes actually I found from that workshop I did. And then there's like a checklist of like how to work with shame, basically, like in that book. And I read them too. And it's basically everything we've covered. So number one, understanding that shame is learned. It's not something that we're born with. It's something, it calls it a hot potato. It's something that's like very quickly and easily passed around by other people without even realizing it sometimes. Shame is not your fault. So again, like something that we didn't plan to put on. We didn't do this on purpose. It says learn to manage rejection. So parts work, letting your inner parts know that they're safe. Find accepting friends, family, and network. Hi, guys.
We accept you.
Yeah, beautiful. Allow yourself to feel joy, pride, excitement, and even sexuality. Shame is a cover emotion. Be compassionate to your shamed part and talk to it as if it was another person.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Cool.
And
like
what I wanna add to that is that so for example, society or your family or maybe your friend group when you were a teenager or your religion, all of these things are systems that get internalized. So for example, if your society is like it's a societal norm that feeling anger is not good, then this will automatically turn into a part in your psyche that is telling you that is constantly shaming the anger. Or if you grew up in a family where nobody was allowed to experience joy, it's like, fuck, like, joy is so childish and don't do that. This voice from the outside turns into a voice from the inside. And what that voice then does, I like the image of like a hypnotist or like a magician that is like altering your emotions. And that voice is, if it's a voice that is shaming, turns into an internal voice that is shaming and is hypnotizing your parts. And that hypnosis and that shaming is actually what I mean by I really have like a magician in my head that is like, oh, I'm Sicilian, and that is really important to understand, I think, when it comes to shame, that, like Ashley said, it's learned and you keep on learning it. Like the learning keeps on repeating because the learning is represented as a part in your psyche, and you can just contact that and also counter it. Like, why would I, really get into a discussion with that part? Really stand firm in your boundaries and be like, wait a minute, like, dear part, why would I, like, it doesn't make any sense to cut off my joy. And look, if I feel anger, I feel more powerful. And don't you want that as well? And the part might be, yeah, actually, so I find that really important to understand that we are hypnotized by the systems we grew up in.
Mhm.
And they say your inner critic has got a particular voice of someone from your upbringing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like who's talking to you there? Is it your mom's voice, your dad's voice, your brother's voice?
It's my ex-mother-in-law.
Wow.
She's mean. She's a bitch.
She's still mean.
Yeah, it's so annoying.
So yeah, and maybe a last thing that I want to add to that is that let's imagine you've been shamed as a child, or you've been shamed, and at some point in your life, there is two ways people generally cope with that. And I touched upon that in the beginning. It's they either feel less than human and they defend against whatever they've experienced with, oh no, I'm not worthy, or like they react to the powerlessness that Jannick. If I'm powerless, then I either have the choice to really retract and be like, okay, don't hurt me, please, or I have the chance to be like, what the fuck did you say? Like to overly inflate it and almost become narcissistic and overdo the power thing. And I have that with myself. When I'm ashamed of myself, I can really tell that either I feel like I'm not worthy and I'm like this. And then there's the part coming in that is swinging the pendulum to the other side, trying to help me with saying, yeah, but actually I'm pretty fucking amazing and I might be the best at this and I might be the best at this. And the important thing to notice there is that it's still a cover up for the original emotion. Like, even though I think I'm the best and I'm feeling like I'm a god and everybody should love me, blah, 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 maybe deep down there's still a shame that this feeling is covering up. And also in the feeling of, oh, everybody hates me is also maybe just a way of covering up something deeper. So these are the two things that are covering up your sense of whatever has been shamed.
Or do you have any books about shame that you recommend?
This.
Those of you
let me
listening on audio,
look.
Tim is going to read the title of it.
It's Healing the Shame That Binds Us by John Bradshaw. He's like the guy who made inner child healing fashionable and famous. And this is a great book. It's a great book. I'm a third through it and I really like it. It has a bunch of nice exercises as well. So if you want to educate yourself on shame, read this book. Also follow the work of David Bedrick. He's
the man.
He moved me to tears multiple times just because he's such a sweet, loving, amazing role model of what a man can be. It's really something to follow his work and do his workshops. So do yourself a favor, do that. And also
not sponsored.
not sponsored.
What's his name again?
David Bedrick.
Yeah.
David Bedrick.
I did his 6-week unshaming course, and to observe him guiding people in processes with such gentleness was really very moving. As Tim says, like of course I can tell, like, if he needed to get angry he would at points, but you can really, it shows you don't need to be so like pushy, and there doesn't need to be catharsis. Like, very deep shifts and the nuances can come just from like continuous mirroring, continuous observation. He's like the king of everything. He notices, like, yeah, Jannick, I notice you're looking up to the right side now, and potentially this happening, and then I notice your shoulders going down, and like as he's doing this, the person's like, oh, I'm being observed. It's so nice.
Yeah,
I'm being
seen. I'm being mirrored. Yeah. So that's great. Also, Ashley's Academy of Anger is obviously a great place to do anything. Overcome shame, get in touch with your anger, do the various courses that are on there. And also, Jannick's Fear Fuckers community is an amazing place to start. And obviously, this podcast is just your direct vehicle, your direct rocket ship taking off into the direction of the unshaming planet.
Yeah. Destination Unshamed.
So I think with that, we can wrap it up.
Thank you, Timmy, for today's topic.
Yeah, that was fun.
Jannick, I have to laugh that this is the first podcast ever that I actually ate something, and it's the one day that you're fasting, so I apologize.
I don't even know what food is anymore at this point.
Day 2.
Day 2. Not even.
Get to day 10, bro.
Jannick lost his memory.
Yeah. It's been 7 years, Jannick.
Your stomach is eating your brain.
Who are you guys?
Okay, thank you guys.
Okay, guys. See you next week
Signing
to
off.
another
Bye.
episode
Bye.
of Spiritual Bypassers. Goodbye.